Good afternoon, friends. We are continuing with our lecture on issues in societies, and today we will discuss the issues in Indian societies. Yesterday we had discussed there are different types of societies, and of course there are different societies, first world, second world and third world also, and we are considering third world countries, in which India is one of them, and also India is considered to be a country which is still in the process of developing like first world or second world, though there are lots of debate. But friends, for our consideration today, let us discuss what is Indian society, how does it look like, what you know about Indian society as a society which is developing. You all know, friends, that Indian society, if we see today, let us see the first thing, that how did Indian society has emerged over the years. If you say today what we see, Indian society has a 4,000 years of history, and this history is interdependent and interconnected with 10 epochs. There are 10 epochs at least which are there, and each epoch has constructed, has contributed in the making of Indian society, which is very, very complex, diverse, and of course it is developing at a very faster pace. If we look at 10 interdependent and interconnected epochs, let us see the first epoch of the Indian society. Different epochs, if we see, the first epoch of the Indian society is of Indian Valley civilization. Indus Valley civilization is the first epoch. Now, it is basically a history which we say it's a prototype of history, because we have yet not been able to decipher the history of Indus Valley civilization. It is the uniqueness of this civilization is, as you all know, that it is basically an urban civilization in India, with the two very dominant cities, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, as the two great sites. The roads were at 90 degree, as you all know that in different urban centers we have pakka roads, we have a road with the charcoals, and here we see the roads were at 90 degrees. It has also the sea route trade, and of course commerce was through the sea. So this is the first epoch in the making of Indian society. That means you can say the 4,000 years of history is started with the Indus Valley civilization. If we take this, then we can see this history is getting complicated. It is getting more complex with the second epoch. And the second epoch in the making of Indian society is the advent of Aryans and the establishment of Vedic civilization. This is the second epoch which we see. Now this epoch is of course a very different epoch. We are seeing that in this epoch a unique type of society emerges. Now this unique type of society, if you see, is a rural society. Now rural society in which people lived in rural areas. Now we had in Indus Valley civilization, which was an urban civilization. Now in another civilization, with the advent of the Aryans, we have a society which was rural in nature. So people say that there is a movement from rural to urban. But here we see in Indian society that we are seeing a movement for urban society to rural society. Now it is here, friends, the complications of the Indian social structure is getting formed. what is this Indian social structure of Indian society? The four Vedas were written, and out of one Veda, that is Rig Veda, we have a social structure. This social structure is based on fourfold Varna system: the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Shudras. This was basically the making of Hindu social order. The Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and Shudras, during this period, they were basically the part of Hindu social order or Indian society. Now, this society was the basis. It is said it laid the basis of the social structure of Indian society. Villages started appearing in this society at this epoch, which is basically somewhere 1500 BC. So we have a 4,000 years of history of Indian society, in which we have seen two epochs. The first epoch was Indus Valley civilization, and the second epoch is advent of Aryans, in which the complexities are added. Now let us go to the third epoch from here. The third epoch is basically the protest religions in Indian society. The society started getting more complex because the Hindu social order was basically becoming a little bit more rigid, and therefore more and more people were trying to protest. And in this protest, we have two protest religions in Indian society, and these are Buddhism and Jainism. 564 BC is the time when Buddha comes and preaches, gives first sermon. Now Buddha is considered to be the most important ascetic of Indian society, and this Buddha, if you see, has considered the founder of monastic order of the world. Nowhere in this world we will find that there are basically monasteries. Monasteries were first formed by founder was Buddha, and two famous monasteries founded at the time of Buddhism was Nalanda in Bihar and Taxila in the northwest, which acted as the centers of higher learning as universities are today. So we have a complexity added in the Indian society. From Hinduism we see, or Vedic religion, as we say, Vedic religion, there were no gods which were worshipped. There were fourfold Varna system. Now within that, actually, we have adding Buddhism as a philosophy, as a religion, and Jainism. The Mahavira, the Jain, was basically another preacher who preached another religion. So we have now 3 or 4 groups being formed. On the one hand, we have Vedic religion. On the other hand, we have Buddhism, and then third is Jain religion. So Indian complexity is getting more and more complex as the time moves, and we have come to 600 BC, in which Buddhism and Jainism were flourishing. Now from here we see, friends, that the 4,000 years of Indian society's history is getting more complex, more diverse, because different types of groups are being added. We are not talking about advents of Shak, Hun, Kushan, Scythian, and Parthians. This was the time when actually they also started coming. The complexity was increasing. Now let us see the fourth epoch in the construction of Indian society. The fourth epoch is considered to be very important epoch, friends, for the Indian society, because with the advent of the Islam, this is coterminous with the fourth epoch in the Indian society. Islam for the first time came to India 8th century AD, which is considered to be the fourth epoch in the making of Indian society. The contact of India with Islam is almost a millennium old, friends. And I will say that, it is said that Islam came to India with the help of sword, which is a misnomer. If we see the contact of India, specifically the contact of India with Islam, we have seen that almost a millennium old. Now approximately 130 million Muslims live in India, possibly the maximum population of Muslim around the world. Now Islam came to India, friends, not with the swords but with the Sufi tradition, which emphasized the ascetic personal ethics and mystical self-abnegation. And if you see the most important Sufi saint of during this period, it was basically Nijamuddin Aulia, and we have a shrine in Delhi itself, and we have Khwaja Moinuddin Chishti in Jaipur, where actually the Rajasthan is very important center of Sufism. So Islam came to India not with the help of sword, rather it came with the help of mystic Sufi saints who wanted to have a very, very different lifestyle. They were Americans, they were actually wanderers, just like the Bhakti saints of Indian society. Islam also came to India with the help of the merchants, and we have these stories that Bohra Muslims were basically merchants who came to India in the northwest India, and they traded with the Indian population. This itself shows that how Indian society was basically getting constructed with the help of another religion, and this was Islam. And now Islam is not only a religion that was basically worshipping of Allah, but there was much more in Islam as well. Because Muslim had a tradition. There were different dynasties within Islam, and they brought with themselves a very new culture, language, art, architecture, festival, food, habits, knowledge system, governance, and it produced a very different culture. If you see Persian, Urdu, all these languages are from the Islamic tradition. Urdu emerged within Indian society, but with the help of confluence of Persian and Hindi in Indian land. The Mughal art and architecture, the song forms, the art form, the architecture, the governance system, which brought by the Muslims in India, by the Islam, the great emperor rule with the land reforms, the zamindari, the rayatwari, the mahalwari, all these reforms were basically brought in Indian society with the advent of Islam in Indian society. And therefore, Indian society became a very different, culturally very diverse society with the advent of Islam. And therefore, we have to keep in mind that Muslims who came to India, they never wanted to go back. Therefore, they made this Indian society as their part and parcel society, and they remain. Therefore, friends, the fourth epoch is very important epoch. Why it is important? Because the seeds which were sown at that time, they were basically there throughout the history, and they are still not only present in India, but they have shaped South Asian society as well. Because the partition of India, we will discuss it later, the partition of India which emerged in 1947 created Pakistan, and out of Pakistan emerged Bangladesh. That means out of 7 countries of the South Asian society, 3 have emerged from within the India society. Therefore, South Asian society has much to do with the Indian society as well. The language, the religion of South Asian societies are much more actually akin to the Indian society as well. So, Indian society's peculiarity is being actually implemented, it is being constructed throughout the history. Now we have reached till the 800 AD with the advent of Islam. Let us, friends, go to 5th epoch. Another cultural diversity is added to Indian society, and this is emergence of Sikhism in 15th century. Guru Nanak is said to be the founder of Sikhism, and the holy book Guru Granth Sahib was compiled in 1604. Now, Sikhs were supposed to have 5 emblems: kesh, long hairs; kacha, that is short breeches; kada, that is iron bengal; and kripan, a small sword; and kangha, that is comb. These were 5 symbols of the Sikhism, external symbols, with Guru Granth Sahib as their holy text. Now, number of communities suffering from different groups, specifically Hinduism and even Islam, they converted to Sikhism. Sikhism is also very important because it is a syncretic religion, because it has in its holy book, that is Guru Granth Sahib, it has verses. It has verses from Raidas, who was an untouchable saint poet. There are verses in Guru Granth Sahib of Kabir, whose identity was definitely a very conflicting identity. People said he was a Muslim, some people said that no, Islam, he was Hindu, and therefore his verses are also there. There are other saint poets of those verses have been incorporated in Guru Granth Sahib. Guru Granth, not only that, Sikhism played down the fifth epoch, if you say, it played down the caste system. And there is no mention of caste system in Sikhism. Therefore, fifth epoch adds another religion to Indian society. By the 15th century, friends, we have 5 very important religions in the Indian society. We had Hinduism, we have Buddhism, we have Jainism, we have Islam, and Sikhism started appearing in 15th century. Till this fifth epoch, if you see, we have traveled a long history and diversities are getting added into this epoch. Now, from here, let us move to sixth epoch. If you can change the slide, if we can change the slide, we can see this sixth epoch. Sixth epoch, if you see, please change the slide. If you are not changing the slide, it's not. This is sixth epoch, the Bhakti tradition. Bhakti tradition is very important epoch of the Indian society, because the Bhakti tradition is basically an expression of the devotees. It is the basically expression of the devotees, the saint poets who went out singing song of devotion to the people in the vernacular languages. In different regions, 2 types of bhakti religions are there. One is revered deities with idol. They worshipped Lord Shiva, Vishnu, and Devi, that is Shakti cult. Now, famous poet or favorite bhakti saint of this is basically Tulsi Das, who has written a epic Ramcharitmanas or Ramayan, as they say. Now, there are 2 other saints, which the second stream of bhaktis are basically those people who basically worshipped formless God. They did not have any God. Rather, they did not have any characteristics. Rather, they had reverence, bhakti, the devotion. And devotional songs were sung by these people. Devotional songs were dedicated to the people, to the God. And the basic theme on which the people worked, these saints, bhakti saints of formless God worked. They said that in the eyes of God, everyone is equal. And therefore, friends, if you see 2 very important saints or saint poets of this era, it is basically Ravidas, who belonged to ex-untouchable community, and Kabir Das, who was again basically a person who had a very different identity. They both belong to the so-called lower strata of the Indian society, but they yielded a very, very long, a very, very broad followership. They had too many followers, and their writing, their vocabulary, their speeches, their couplets, they were of profound knowledge. I will say that they were of profound wisdom which tells you what is good and what is bad. And therefore, it became so important that after their names, sects were formed. We have Raidas Panth and Kabir Panth. Many panths are there, Panthic religions, which basically brought the servile classes, the excluded communities within their fold. They gave them space, and with this space, people developed Bhakti religions. And in that context, friends, Bhakti religion gave space to the excluded communities to come to the fore, to the center stage, and therefore it gave space to those people who did not have words or did not have rights to enter into the temples and Hindu religion. Therefore, it is very, very important to note the emergence of Bhakti saints or Bhakti movements, as they say, and this gave a new composition on the Indian society and a new texture. Now, from here, friends, we move to seventh epoch. Seventh epoch is also another important epoch, and this epoch is important because the Portuguese people came first. The four groups of Europeans have come during this period. Portuguese, then came the Dutch, and after that French people came, and last were the British. Last were the British to come, and they were last to go. Now, if we take this seventh epoch, another religion also is coming with this epoch, and this is Christianity. Christianity comes with the advent of the Europeans, and specifically there is a debate that Christianity existed in Indian society in 1000 AD or so, but actually with the advent of Europeans, this was a pan-India phenomena, that the Christian missionaries, they went baptizing people from nook and corner of the Indian society. The first person or first ship of the Europeans, or first people who came to India from the European side, they were Portuguese. And you all know that 17th of May 1498, Vasco da Gama landed in Calicut in South India. And from there onwards, friends, the European never stopped. Then came the Dutch and opened the factories in Gujarat and Uttar Pradesh, Bengal, Bihar, etc. However, Dutch people were attracted towards Malaysia, and therefore they went to the other countries. They did not stay for very long in the Indian society. With the Portuguese, the term caste also came to India. For the first time, the term caste came with the Portuguese, and it is a Portuguese term. Caste term is not an Indian term, friends. Now, the third group of the Europeans who came to India, they were Frenchmen. The French came last but were defeated by the British. Now, therefore, they kept their interest away. And what happened after the Treaty of Paris in 1763? Europe withdrew, started, the France withdrew from India. The British came to India with the fourth group was British who came to India. Now, if you take British, they were people who had come to trade India, and East India Company was one of the trading companies. But they never went from here till 200 years with a great movement for their sending off from here. So the British who came India, they colonized India. They colonized India and they created a colony in which they brought sweeping changes to suit their end. Now, why they should bring these sweeping changes? They brought sweeping changes in very different realm. You can begin with the governance, the changes which they brought in governance. Bureaucracy. They created a bureaucracy. They created an independent judiciary. They created an independent polity. They created university. They created industry. All these these changes were brought by British. Now, British not only restricted themselves to the governance. You see, the land pattern was also changed. Zamindari was basically now a very exploitative institution. Now, in this, the British company wanted to have maximum profit, and therefore they lended the zamindars a great freedom to extract lot of revenue from the peasants and the small farmers, and therefore it became very exploitative system. Now, friends, not only they changed the land tenure and revenue system of the country, but the production system, the industrial production system. Now, industrial production system basically led to the destruction of cottage industry of Indian society. So, Indian trade and commerce suffered because of the British India Company and the British policies of import and export. On import, the duties were less, but on export, the duties were more, and therefore people could not sell their goods abroad, but they could import more. So, import and export was another policy by which the exploitation of the Indian society took place by the British. 1853 is one of the very important. 1853 is very important date, and this date is important because the first railway lines were laid down by the British. The first rail lines from Bombay to Thane, and after that India were united with the railways. India was united again by the transportation of the British, the roads, the canals, and also the telegraph. So, a pan-India phenomena started during the advent of British in Indian society. And therefore, friends, what happened with the new system of governance, with the new system of polity, with the new system of education, with the new system of rail transport and other things, what happened? That seesaw social changes started ushering in Indian society. People called it as westernization. The process of westernization means that imitation of the lifestyle of the Western people. And in Indian society, we saw there was great judgment on the westernization. Indians started changing their lifestyle. They changed their clothing system. The pants and the shirts came into existence. These are all Western clothes which we wear today. The fooding habit, the education system, the thinking process also started changing along with the art and artifacts, or what you call material culture as the process of westernization. The cognitive culture also started changing. Now, if we take the impact of westernization. Some people say that no, it is modernization which has ushered. Now, modernization is a process whereby a new type of society is established on three cardinal principles of modernization. What are these three cardinal principles of modernization? One is individualism. Traditional system is based on holism, where individual does not exist. Individualism is one of the core principles of modernization. Then the second core principle of modernization is achievement. Society is achievement oriented. You can achieve any status you want with your hard work, labor, education. And in traditional system, no, the achievement system is replaced by ascription. You are born into a system, you cannot change your status in your lifetime. The third and the most important cardinal principle of modernization is this worldliness. In traditional system, the cardinal principle of traditional system, the third principle of traditional system is that otherworldliness. There is world beyond this world also, and therefore swarga, narka, or you can say heaven and hell, the concepts of heaven and hell start emerging in traditional system. But in modern system, the hell and heaven are here only. So people said that westernization, advent of British, is not only westernization, it's a process of modernization also. But friends, we have to keep in mind, what we call as modernization came to India as a part of tradition of certain countries. They were having this as part of tradition, but when it came to India, it was modern. So there is basically a question of modernity and tradition. Are they dichotomies or they continuum? I will go with the second one. Tradition and modernity, they are basically continuum. So some countries are at one level of development, the other countries are another. Now this is the seventh epoch of the Indian society into the making. So from cultural diversity side, from the religious diversity side, seventh epoch is very important because another world religion is added. We had Hinduism, we have Buddhism, we have Jainism, we have Islam, and then we have also Sikhism, and last was to be added was Christianity. Now we have a very diverse cultural society in India. But this gives birth, friends, to another very important epoch, and this is eighth epoch of the Indian society, and this is national movement of India's independence. The national movement of India's struggle for independence is the last epoch, eighth epoch of the Indian society. Particularly, if you take the three different mobilization, the reformist mobilization led by Raja Ram Mohan Roy is equated as one of the Indian Renaissance. As we have the world Renaissance, we have Indian Renaissance also. Secondly, the emergence, or secondly, there also emerged a revivalist movement which wanted to go back to the Vedas, and confrontation with the British directly was the another element, the third element of this epoch of Indian national movement. Now, if we take actually the third, that is basically confrontation with the British directly, asking complete freedom for the Indians from the hands of British, then we will see that there is a very, very important aspect of this movement or this epoch is the formation of Indian National Congress. Indian National Congress was formed on 1885, and this led to the Indian national movement or India's struggle for independence. Friends, lot of important movements, advent of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi alias Mahatma Gandhi is also considered here. Now we see that Indian National Congress launched the non-cooperation movement, it launched the civil disobedience movement, it launched the Quit India movement. All these movements were supposed to free the country from the clutches of the British draconian rule or colonial masters. Ultimately, friends, with a long struggle in the leadership of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru and others. Now there was another parallel movement which was going on in the India's independence. That was a revolutionary movement led by the young people like Sukhdev, Rajguru and Bhagat Singh and Chandrasekhar. This movement had its own terrain, but it did not pick up. It did not pick up much, and revolutionary movement died with the, or its edges were blunted with the killing or assassination of Chandrasekhar Azad and hanging of Bhagat Singh. Now, in this context, we see the Indian national movement was a vibrant movement which added very, very different fervor in the Indian society, and we for the first time said that we Indians want our freedom. And Bal Gangadhar Tilak exalted, freedom is my birthright and I will have it. So the Indian national movement, it is said that Indian society got united at a pan-India level. So sometimes movement in a society's history are also very important because they help to unite people in under one umbrella, and Indian national movement united the Indian society for its freedom, and therefore it's very, very important epoch. This is 8th epoch. Now from here, friends, let us move to the 9th epoch. And 9th epoch is a very, very painful exercise for the Indian society. Now this epoch, 9th epoch, if we see the, if you can see the slide, the partition of India or the emergence of Pakistan is the 9th epoch. Now if we see the 9th epoch, what is happening in the 9th epoch? It was a very painful event. The communal frenzy gripped with 500,000 people killed, about 5.5 million traveled from each side across India and Pakistan border in Punjab. On the other hand, 400,000 Hindus migrated. 400,000 Hindus migrated from Sindh. The tide of refuge caused the explosion of communal strife in Indian society. And lastly, it led to the assassination of Gandhiji, who on 30th of January 1948. The nation got a very terrified time in the terms of partition of India and the emergence of Pakistan and the assassination of Gandhi. It was a very painful exercise, friends. Why was it painful? Painful because Indian society suffered a great loss of energy, time, money, and of course the towering personality of so many individuals, because people changed the side. Some people went to Pakistan and some people came to India, and therefore it was a great loss suffered by the Indian society after the partition and the emergence of Pakistan. Now friends, from here we move to the 10th epoch of the democratic constitution making. This is also a very, very important epoch in the Indian society's history. And it is a very important epoch because most of the problems which India was facing was supposed to be solved by the Constituent Assembly, which had the privilege to formulate the Constitution of India. The Constitution Assembly took 2 years, 11 months and 17 days for passing the Indian Constitution. However, Assembly took 114 days. 114 days. There's the consideration of draft constitution, which had finally 395 articles and 8 schedules. Finally, India became democracy on 26th of January 1958 when we promulgated our constitution. The constitution began on 26th of January 1950. Indian constitution, as you all know, was a revolutionary document because it had very revolutionary ideas. The ideas of democracy, the idea of representation, ideas of government and personal liberty, equality before the law, reservation, abolition of zamindari system. All they were basically very, very revolutionary ideas. The democracy India never had. It was a hierarchical society. Castes placed one above the other. The representative government was not there. It was the king rule. People did not have any right to cast their vote. And therefore, we had given ourselves from the constitutional right to cast your vote. Every person who is now above 18 years is liable to cast his vote in favor of any political organization or any individual. And therefore, the Constituent Assembly gave a very revolutionary document. It has succeeded. Today, if we see India, it has succeeded because of our constitution. The constitution has brought to a large extent unity, social change and integration, and has strengthened the Indian democracy by bringing seesaw changes in the Indian society, on the one hand on resolving the conflicts and contradictions within the Indian society on the other. Therefore, friends, constitution should not be only written, should not be only read as a document which has legality. It is also a social document that we have to understand, because many of our problems, social problems, whether it is caste, whether it is religion, whether it is exploitation of gender, all of them are solved, or all of them have an answer in this document, and we become a citizen of an independent country under the Constitution of India. And therefore, it is a very, very revolutionary document which we have to realize, which gives us ourselves a new identity of citizens of India. From this, friend, we see that we have come to contemporary society. These 10 epochs, we began from Indus Valley civilization. We came to basically the second epoch. It was advent of Aryans. The third epoch was protest religions, Buddhism and Jainism. The fourth epoch was advent of Islam. The fifth was emergence of Sikhism. The sixth was, of course, the Bhakti movement. The seventh was advent of Europeans, and eighth was basically the partition, the national movement, and of course ninth was partition of India, and 10th is the making of the democratic constitution and the democracy in Indian society. These all 10 epochs, friends, have given us a very, very different society, because we have reached also in a very different epoch, in a very different history, and today we are in a process of globalization. Globalization is the era in which we are living today. And globalization, if you see in Indian society, is a part of larger process in the world. Yesterday, I was talking about globalization as a process. And this globalization as a process is basically a world phenomena. The world has been united by different methods and these methods are material culture, and of course material culture. Within material culture we have internet, we have telephony, we have MNCs, industries, we have also basically transportation. All these ideas, all these tangible realities, they have united Indian society in a very, very different way with the world. World over is getting united with Indian society. The MNCs have started their production in different parts of the world, and India is one of the very preferred destination. The call centers in India can reach to any place, and you can also reach to any place with the help of call centers. But friends, this process of globalization in India has four processes simultaneously. The first process of globalization in India, we see a process of homogenization where India gets united in the other parts of the world. With the other parts of the world, India gets united, and therefore it looks that homogenization has come. The second process is pluralization. Along with the world culture, along with number of world cultural elements, like you take example that we have Nokia cell phones everywhere. India also have actually Nokia phones, and therefore you see the on the one hand we have bouquet of the culture, material culture of the world in India also. But India has its own specific culture. This specificity is said in the clothes, in the foods, and all those people have basically united to produce a very different type of culture. We will call it a plural culture. On the one hand, one set, the world culture exists. On the side, we also have the process of Indian culture. From here, we move traditionalization. The process of traditionalization, that means with the modernization, the world culture, the primordial identities, the tribal identities, the Hindu identities, the Muslim identities, which are indigenous identities, with the local identities, they start basically raising, and therefore a process of traditional identity assertion also takes place in the process of globalization. Now the fourth epoch, the fourth method is also hybridization. What has happened? The fourth process in this whole globalization is that we have produced a very, very different type of culture. Now what has happened, that we have taken certain element of the world culture and we have added our Indian culture, and we have produced a new variety. For instance, in culinary, in food habit, we have produced McDonald's burger. Now McDonald's burger is a unique composition of world culture, that is bun, and another potato cutlet is Indian, and we have put it actually and have produced a very different type of burger, that is McDonald's burger, vegetarian McDonald's burger, which is basically having Indian potato cutlet and western bun. We also can see MTV. MTV is another form of hybridization. Now here we see a pop music which is western, which is of course European, or it can be also world over from anywhere, that is basically a pop. And we have Hindi words, the songs are written in Hindi, so we have Hindi pop as a particular type of hybrid variety which is aired. So we have a process of homogenization, pluralization, traditionalization, and hybridization. And therefore friends, we have to see that in the process of globalization, one world, one culture does not exist. The equation one world and one culture is a misfit argument, which people say that world is becoming a village, world is getting united and it is turned into village. No friends, what happens when a culture comes from abroad, an alien culture comes, it mixes with the local culture and produces a new form of culture, which may be either this side or that side, but it is not necessarily the culture which is coming from outside totally and the culture from within. And therefore it is very important to say that globalization will never be able to produce one world and one culture. But friends, over the years, what has happened? Over the years it happened that Indian society, which is having a history of 4,000 years, has become diverse, complicated, and of course, 4 type in one society. What is this historical development of Indian society which has created 4 into 1 society? What is this 4 into 1 society? The first aspect of Indian society which we see today is socially stratified society. Socially stratified means there are rich and poor, there are rural and urban, there are male and female, and therefore we can see that in Indian society, which is a stratified society, it is like any other society of the world, because world over we have this stratification system. The second aspect of the Indian society is pluralistic in nature. Indian society is pluralistic in nature. The presence of most of the religions in Indian society, that is Buddhism, Jainism, Zoroastrianism, Hinduism, Islam, Sikhs, and Christianity. Now, the third aspect of this cultural history and the nature of Indian society is it is culturally heterogeneous. Around about 6,000 castes. Only Mandal Commission, if you see, has been talking about 3,743 castes. Only Mandal Commission. Then there are 1,040 castes which are considered as scheduled castes. There are other 800 or so tribals. All these groups, they constitute the cultural diversity in the Indian society. Then we have tribal language. We have language or 1,600 linguistic groups which speak very different language. Even our constitution identifies with 22 languages. Earlier, on the note of rupee 1, there used to be 15 languages which were printed, and it was promised that we will give you this much money. This was printed on the note. So we have linguistic diversity, we have cultural diversity, we have a very different food, we have a very different fauna and flora. Last but not the least, along with social stratification, along with pluralism and cultural heterogeneity, we also are called as hierarchically arranged society. Now, hierarchically arranged society means that we are divided. We are divided in the caste system, and each caste is basically related in a hierarchical manner in which the lowest caste, then the upper caste, the uppermost caste, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, and last comes the untouchables, which are basically 16 crore of the untouchables, ex-untouchables of the Indian society considered as scheduled caste. So, friends, in this context, we see that Indian society is unique as far as its historical development concerned. We basically have 10 epochs of the Indian society which we have been actually developing for the 4,000 years of history, and this has produced a very different type of society which is called as 4 into 1 society. The 4 into 1 society, if you see, is basically socially stratified. There is rich and poor, pluralistic, culturally heterogeneous, and hierarchically arranged. But it is definitely a very diverse society. But friends, we have tried to resolve our problems with unity in diversity. And this unity in diversity is basically helped by a constitution of India, which basically writes to suppress every other identity and gives us a unique identity, and that is identity of an Indian citizen. which no other book, no other religion can give you as an Indian. And this is a unified identity, which is basically the hallmark, which is the strength of the Indian society and keeps us going. And therefore, we have to relish this a very, very different society, a very different texture of Indian society. Thank you, friends.